dentistry at Calcutta Dental College, and she's a dentist by training and a storyteller by college. Today, she read from a book and be in conversation with Dr. Nandini Sen, Professor of English at Delhi University. Please join me in welcoming her.
Thank you, Ariman. Thank you so much. Um, so, good evening, everyone, and thank you all for being here. And it gives me so much pleasure to be in conversation with a fellow author, a batchmate, a fellow dipsite, and from the little introduction our young man gave us, also a professor. A dentist by profession and everything else, and all of you know Ayush anyway. And our in-house joke is that there's an entire ministry in her name. So we keep pulling her leg about that. Okay, so this is her debut novel, and one can see that it has come entirely from the heart. It is everything that she has seen, everything that she has experienced, everything that she has known in her time on this earth, if I may put it that way. It has all come together in this very uniquely told tale, which is simple yet complex, very, very humane. It touches your heart because it's a story which was waiting to be told. And I'm so happy that Ayush did the job. COVID provided her the time when she could sit down and she could pen these words. So before I ask any question, I think I will ask the one basic question which I think all of us want to know. So Ayush, what made you write? Did you conceive of being a writer at any point of time? Because you have an ancestry, your parents and your grandparents. So did writing come naturally? Was it something that you thought that you're going to be doing? How did you get to write a novel? Take us through the process.
Okay, thank you, Nandini, for being here and being my moderator. Well, the thoughts of this novel and the ideas, I think they started in my childhood. All these stories were there in my head because I used to go for my vacation and for in between times to my maternal grandparents' place, which was in the same colony Hoskas where I used to stay. And the origin of these stories came from that house because I used to see so many things happening around me. Mm-hmm. And then obviously imagination also ran wild while I was writing this novel, and COVID gave me a lot of time. Yeah. Because in COVID everyone knows we were like sitting at home and baking, cooking, gardening, doing all kinds of things. But my college was closed for a year and I got that time and the inclination to write this novel, and I thought it was a kind of a therapy for me also. It was very therapeutic because I write a daily diary. My best friend Minu, she knows I write diary every day, and that gives me a very therapeutic effect. It really calms me down. I write the events of the day. So I think this House of Fates was a super therapy. It was like writing 100 diaries all at once. So that was the genesis of this novel, and once I started writing, I don't think it took me much time, maybe 3-4 months, and I was done. And I think it's been 5 years, and I still haven't been able to write my second. I've been trying very hard, so that's how it came, the idea.
Okay, yeah. So you call it the House of Fates. That's a very interesting title. Um, just take us through. Did you choose the title? Was it your editor who chose it for you, or is there any very deep meaning which you might want to share with the audience?
Okay. So the inspiration behind this novel is again my maternal grandparents' house. So I'm revealing it for the first time. I've not revealed it anywhere else. The house's number is F8. So you can see it's a deeper meaning. It's fate, that way as well. Yeah. And the House of Fates is the reason is that all the characters in this novel, they go through their individual destinies, their individual fates. And then ultimately, the last chapter, if you come to the last chapter, you can see that all the fates come into one and they have a common fate. For those who have read the novel, they know that the house burns down. So their fate was that the house, the very house where all these incidents took place, that house only did not survive. It burned down and became reduced to ash. So that was in their destiny, their fate. And the inner hidden meaning is, of course, as I've revealed today, the number of that house is F8. And also, I may tell you, in numerology, 8 number, it's the number of death, is the number of death and destruction. So 8 is a very dangerous number. In fact, I also stay away from it. I don't plan anything in number 8. So I'm a little wary of that number.
I
It's a
wasn't-
very, very powerful number.
Uh-huh. I wasn't aware of it. Now I'll remember. So Ayush, I see. I mean, it's of course you reveal the end for people who have not read it. So, well, the fates do meet with a very sort of tragic end, so to say. But the novel per se is extremely violent. I mean, I saw a lot of violence, and I saw a lot of violence being done on women, and very often also by women. And there, I mean, there's so much sort of, how do I put it, very dysfunctional patriarchy which is at play, which is harming the characters per se. There is an attempt at female solidarity, but somehow it doesn't build up the way it probably should have. So it kind of crumbles. So we see the House of Fates really crumble. Any specific reason why you felt the need to talk about so much trauma, so much pain which is inflicted by one human being on another, by one man on the wife who doesn't even understand, if I may reveal a very minor incident, there's a woman who loses her baby, and the husband is actually thinking to himself that good riddance to bad rubbish, but he cannot say it upfront. So it just leaves you wondering, is there any specific reason why you show so much trauma?
Yeah. So actually, violence against women, as you are seeing every day in the newspaper and otherwise also, it's very common. But I think only 10% of that violence is actually that comes up front. The 90% of that violence is going on behind those closed doors of the house. That's what I've written. Nobody knows what is going behind the house. Nobody knows what is happening in anyone's bedroom. Nobody knows what's happening in kitchen, bathroom, or anywhere else. Right? That you are just seeing 10% which is coming in the newspapers. What about the 90% which you don't know about? And my special focus is on the girl child who is very small, the small girl child who has no clue. Okay, she is being exploited right, left, and center, and she has been suppressed so much she cannot express herself. Even to her mother, she cannot express. Outside, so it's out of question because she'll be like, what will people say? Log kya kahenge? And then in a city like Delhi, where this novel is based, the molestation that takes place in buses. We have seen that chapter of Kamini, the way she is molested in bus. And otherwise also, you go inside a dark alley after 7 o'clock. Okay, if you're a young girl, anything can happen. In another chapter, Subhadra is followed by 4 boys, and she goes to the extreme of taking a chain out from her purse and punishing those boys. But is there any Subhadra around? I don't think there is even a single Subhadra in our society who will actually do this. This is all a figment of my imagination. If something like this happened, she should have taken out a chain and she should have beaten up those boys and she should have taken that katta and slashed them. But nobody does that. Who does that? Not even 1%. So it's just a taking out of the emotion inside, the suppressed emotion, that if Subhadra, Kamini or Latika are out there, they should be doing this or they could be doing this. So we should not be surprised because they are going through so much of trauma at home and outside.
So if I interpret what you're saying, one is you are obviously very pained seeing what has been happening and what has now, what has been normalized in the society now. Sadly, we read of a rape happening like, I mean, whether newspapers, whether Twitter, whether wherever, just kind of scroll through. We've become so dehumanized that we kind of scroll through these news and they don't even seem like news now. We've dehumanized crime against women. It's become part and parcel of our lives.
If I may
very
interrupt you,
unfortunately,
the two
yeah.
boys who molest Radha, the protagonist, they tell her, "हम तुम्हें rape नहीं कर रहे." So they make it a like a kind of a favor to her that they are not raping her. They are just trying to molest her. So this is what happens otherwise also behind closed doors. Rape is okay, the one extreme. What about the things that take place between rape? Even
Absolutely,
a
yeah,
man who is holding your hand not in the way that he's supposed to, if he's offering you a glass of water, that happens in one of the chapters. She gives him water, but he holds his hand in her hand in an inappropriate way.
Absolutely.
So that is also wrong.
Yeah. So, so basically what I was leading towards this is that one, you were pained seeing what was happening in the society, and this is your own way of saying that A, we should be protesting, and B, I really wish there were a Subhadra amongst us who would,
Exactly.
take
such
that
kind of a
extreme
thing.
step
Yes,
and maybe stop this kind of violence.
Exactly.
Is there anything else that makes you talk about this violence? Is it just what you've observed, or is there something that you have negotiated, maybe because as a Kashmiri Pandit, or maybe from the familial situation, or something that you have seen which has affected you so much that you felt the need to tell the stories of these women?
So this book is based basically in a high-class Kashmiri Pandit family of Delhi, and I wanted to bring to front the bit of the Kashmir imbroglio also, because the matriarch and the patriarch, the patriarch, he's a political leader of Kashmir, and he basically believes in secularism. He wants that all communities should live together. But as we all know, in 1990, the Kashmiri Pandits, they migrated from Kashmir and they came to Delhi and other parts of Delhi. And they were in tenements all around Delhi in very inhuman conditions, Delhi, Jammu, and other areas of India. And they stayed in a miserable condition for many years before they finally settled down. And now they are well settled, they are all over the world, they are doing very well for themselves. But that period, when they migrated from there and they came, that was a very traumatic period for them. My cousin is here. She's also a Kashmiri Pandit. She knows about that very well. But there's another school of thought in which it is said that this happened actually because there was no government support at that time. The government was not able to support them. They could have been given an area where they were secure because we had a good army, a good enough big army which could give these migrants support. But unfortunately, turn of events came that at that time that India was politically very in a very fragile state, and the state was not very strong. So, and they did not expect that a migration like or this scale would happen, that they would actually migrate and never come back. They thought it was like a temporary migration. So sometime they would be out in Jammu, Delhi, and other areas, and then eventually they would come back. But nothing like that happened. It was a very massive migration. 4 lakh of them left, and then they never came back. And now, of course, it's been so many years. It's been 35 years. They're well settled. But this thing was also there that these are two schools of thought. Some people think that secularism is there, Pandits should come back, everyone will be happily settled there. And the Kashmiri Pandits themselves, because my relations are there, I know they are very bitter about it. They will never forgive, they will never forget, and they will always blame the other community for doing what has happened. But what is the truth? Nobody knows. We cannot blame
No,
anybody.
in fact, forget about the blame part. In fact, I thought like if you read someone like Rahul Pandita, people who've talked about their experiences, I think your take has been very mild. I mean, you talk about these characters and what they are going through and so on and so forth. You don't so much talk about the politics of the thing. You don't talk so much about. So you concentrate purely on Delhi and you talk about the Delhi people and what they were going through and the quirks of their existence, if I may put it that way. So take us through your characters, Maji and Boji. What made you talk about them, and why are they so distinct and so important in your novels?
So Boji is inspired again from my maternal grandfather, my Nana. He was a political leader of Kashmir. He was parallel to Sheikh Abdullah. He actually had different thoughts from him. Otherwise, he would have been the chief slash prime minister of Kashmir. So he was a great Kashmiri scholar. He has written more than 35-40 books on Kashmir. He is very well known, Pandit Premnath Bazaz. And so Boji was inspired from him. He was a secular man. He was always in favor of plebiscite, of asking the Kashmiris what they wanted, who they wanted to go with, which never happened. And he felt that the locals should have been asked who they want to go with and not taken for granted that they should stay with India. He was
Precisely.
not in favor of that. And my grandmother, she was the best grandmother anyone could ever have. She was a typical nani, making all those wonderful Kashmiri dishes which are mentioned in my novel, and thankfully which I have inherited from my mom and from my nani in that line. And she was an extremely good cook. So since he was a political leader, we always, in my grandparents' house, there were a lot of people coming. Like at a time there were 15-20 people for lunch, dinner. Us time pe hota bhi aisa
Hota
tha,
bhi
like
tha, haan.
you know, lot of, without, you could just come at the drop of a hat.
Yeah.
So my nani would be asked within 10 minutes, ye bana do, and it would be there. And she was not educated, but she was a total support to my nana. So whatever his ideology was, and she was soft-hearted. She always had the Pandit's feeling at heart, which I've told in my book, that she had the parallel thought that no, they should be heard and asked. And I guess, although I had obviously never discussed with this, because I think she passed away when I was only 13 years old. But I definitely feel she would have been with the Pandits, like I've written in the book. She would have said, no, they are migrants, they are living in tenements. I will not approve of this. They should get their due. India is theirs. They need to go back.
No, I know exactly when you talk about, because I actually wrote inspired by my nani. My nani, of course, never knew about this. Nanis are a huge influence. Mine kept insisting that she was illiterate, and her greatest sort of entertainment that she would give herself in this joint family was to take the newspaper of the day and read it from cover to cover, from first word to the last word, and maintaining constantly that she's illiterate. When she obviously could read, probably she meant she couldn't read in English, she could read in Bangla, but then she would read every word, and she had an opinion on every subject. But she would say whatever that she had to say to the men, and then add, but I am an illiterate woman. So, you know, and that always found its mark, you know, the sarcasm was never lost. She would say the most, you know, they're discussing politics, she would have a very strong political view, which she would air, and then promptly say, but what do I know? I'm an illiterate woman, and walk away. So I think that thing probably really works. So I can completely see.
Yeah.
So yeah, since we are talking Kashmir, and since we are talking about, you know, where your influences have come from, you want to talk about the food, because food is a carrier of history. It's a carrier of culture.
Yeah.
It's a carrier of you know, your childhood memories into contemporary times. So how do you deal with the concept of food, and it's what it has made you, and how you find it in the book?
Yeah, so that's a very interesting question, because I think for every Kashmiri, food is the center of the universe. I think my
every
cousin,
human being.
she's written a book on Kashmiri cuisine, best-selling book. So, and we
Would love
attended
to
that
read it,
event in
yeah.
Kunzam recently. So, food is something that is centered in every Kashmiri Pandit home. Without food, there's no conversation, and sometimes the only conversation is food and nothing else.
हाँ, वो तो एक मील में दूसरा मील डिस्कस हो रहा होता है.
Exactly. Yeah, sure. This food aspect, I think she would be a very...
Why was food that important? I don't need this. Because on the first day of marriage, my mother-in-law told me, second, third day, she said, अगर तुमको husband के पेट के अंदर जाना है, so you have to make a way through his stomach. So that's how I learned cooking, and I became a good cook.
The way to a man's heart is through
through
the
the
stomach.
The same man for the last 60 years.
Yeah, like they say, the way to a man's heart is through the stomach. So you, ma'am, knew
And food definitely plays a lot of role, main role.
Absolutely.
But not between us Pandits only, it is between Muslims and Pandits. I mean, I still have one very important person in our family. He's so much fond, he's a Muslim fellow, but he likes Kashmiri food, Pandit food. Not his own food. He says Kashmiri chamal, Kashmiri rogan josh, Kashmiri mas. There is no match to that. So there are people who love you for the food, and as I said, कि my mother-in-law told me कि अगर तूने इसका जितना है दिल, तो इसके खाने का ख्याल रख लेना. तो मैंने कहा ये दर 17-18 साल की लड़की थी बालिका वधू, तो उसे मैंने कहा ये बैठ ही गया दिमाग. So food is a binding force between the communities, between the cultures. whether you are
Absolutely,
from,
ma'am. Yeah.
East or west or north or even Kashmir, we have so many cuisines. We have the lake cuisine is separate. The Jammu cuisine is different, and our Srinagar cuisine is different. So, but food is the main thing. We say food doesn't do anything, but I eat.
No. Food.
No,
That's
no,
what I was saying. It's a
And
carrier
end
of
the
history.
day,
Yeah.
You are a businessman or a minister or a chief minister or whatever your position. You want good food होने से पहले खाना तो तुम्हें अच्छा ही चाहिए.
नहीं, वो तो बिल्कुल हमारे अभी मतलब नानी के टाइम से, मम्मी के टाइम से, हमारे टाइम में बहुत चीज़ें बदल गई है. बट अभी भी वही हम एक ऑन लाइक व्हेन वी आर हैविंग लंच वी आर ऑलरेडी प्लानिंग द नेक्स्ट मील. तो ये तो खत्म नहीं हुआ. So
डिनर में क्या
बन रहा है?
लंच में क्या बन?
Plus, what also interests me, which since you've done a book on cuisine, is also the history. So for Bengalis, we have a lot of posto. Now, where has posto come from? Poppy seeds. So what is the history? So then you go all the way to the British ships and how they used to go to China and so there's a whole historicity.
Food also came from Persia.
बिल्कुल.
Influenced by Afghans, Persians.
So, which is why I was asking Ayush that you want to talk about it, but you are, of course, the food expert in the family.
I got this mother-in-law pot and good. Becoming a good. I don't think Ayush is that good cook.
No, I am. I will disagree. You can ask my family. You can ask my sons. They will tell you better.
Okay, coming back. So, Ayush, do you want to talk a little about the unhappy marriage part of the whole thing? I mean, we did mention it, but people, having to live their lives in unhappy marriages, not being able to do anything about it, and not doing anything about it क्योंकि लोग क्या कहेंगे.
Exactly.
And it is not something that happened then, it happens even today.
Every time,
I mean, the very recent case which the media is now talking about, I mean, every day there are like 3 cases of women who could not leave marriages for whatever might have been the reason. So you want to talk a little about that?
So Meera, the character in my novel, her reason is she doesn't actually want to leave the marriage, but her husband is a good for nothing. He doesn't do anything, and I think in India it's over exaggerated if the husband is living with the wife.
And he lives in the sasural.
In the sasural. So it's kind of over exaggerated. Why is he living in the sasural? Why is he not living separately? Why doesn't he have his own house? These kind of standards are there, which is very wrong. It should be something that works for the full family. If it works for you, then it's good. Whether you're living in the sasural, or you have your own home, or you are living with wife's parents, or you're living with your own parents, that's totally an individual decision. But since it's a story of India and it's a typical family, the thing is put on him कि तुम यहाँ क्यों रह रहे हो, and then he doesn't get the respect that he should get, or he's a
ghar jamai, so
he would be expecting. Nobody offers him tea when he comes back from work. Everybody's like, "Acha, aa gaya," types, ghar. He's back home without, he doesn't have his own home. And then they even give this example: if the Kashmiri Pandits can live in small tenements, why can't you take a tenement and live? He's a damad of such a rich family, or you can see affluent family of Delhi. Why will he go and live in a tent? That doesn't make sense. So I think, but the frustration with the protagonist Meera has basically because she wants a second child, and he doesn't want, because he's also justified. He's saying, obviously, if you raise a child in India, you are responsible right from the day he's born till he gets a job, or even after, till you become a parent yourself.
Yeah.
It's not that you have a child. Like US में क्या होता है? You have the child, once he turns 18, he's on his own. Like my mom, she was working in the US in a music school. She had a student So this student, her name was Diane. She used to like learn sitar from mom in the day, and the night she used to work in a steel
Yeah.
mill. My mom always gives this example because वहाँ पे her parents told her that you're 18, you're on your own. We have nothing to do with you. हमने तुम्हें पैदा किया. That's more than enough. But India में till you become a great grandmother also you're responsible for the child. So शाम का वो था कि since I not earning that much, how will I raise another child, or why will you have another child? But after he refused and she had the abortion, she became so depressed that she never came out of it, and
Yeah.
that affected her elder one, Radha. That affected her. That, and since the mother is not attentive, the girl is going anywhere in the house. She doesn't know who she's hanging around with. Her cousins are coming, they are abusing her, and suddenly she gets that maternal instinct. कुछ तो हो रहा है इस घर में. Where's my daughter? She sees all the other girls happy. Her daughter is nowhere, and she opens the door. She sees molestation taking place. And obviously, मेरा जो extreme reaction था novel में, she takes the gun of her grandfather, her father, and she shoots him down. But वो होता नहीं है. This is a novel. This is a story. This doesn't happen, but it can. Mother can go to that extent to protect her child.
Sure
So
thing.
that is the thing.
And you want to talk a little about the drug problem because you do talk about it quite a bit in the novel.
So drugs, the thing is, I saw that serial. My son had recommended Arim and Breaking Bad. So after I saw that series, I was like, let me put drugs in the novel. So I was like, chalo, it will be something interesting. So I imagined all that, Subhadra and her taking her chachi.
I'm not for a minute saying that you first tried it all out and then you put it in there. So obviously you imagined
Yeah,
it,
yeah,
but
yeah.
I was just thinking that did you see some of that happening, or did you know somebody who went through it?
No,
and-
no. Frankly
and
speaking, not at all. It was all from imagination from Breaking Bad. Arindam is there. He guides us on the wonderful series we should see.
I know he
every
keeps
time.
posting,
Yeah.
yes.
So
Okay, at
that
any
was
point
all.
of time, I'm happy to stop if you want to take audience question.
So-
Does anybody wish to ask her anything related to the novel or about her writing or anything pertinent?
Audience questions are welcome.
You look very beautiful.
Oh, thank you, Aditya. Thank you, thank you.
That
How do you do it?
I think book readings like this
Yes.
make me do it. Something should keep happening. Then only
anybody else
Make an
wishes
effort.
to.
I think it's very close to reality what Ayush has written. It's a very, very well written book.
Yeah.
Every chapter is almost like a news, when there's suspense and you just can't keep the book down. And once you start reading it, you have to finish it.
Absolutely.
So it's like unputdownable, if I could say so. And I think the only question I'll ask Ayush is I'm waiting for the sequel. Is there a sequel
Yeah.
that's coming out? Because we are now looking forward to Ayush becoming a real
A regular writer.
and a series of books getting released from her side. I think that's short, yeah.
For sure, yes.
Okay, that's a good question. The thing is that definitely not a sequel, but my genre is now domestic thrillers. So I would love to write about another house and what's going on there, because I think I found my calling in this domestic thriller genre. And I don't want to write a sequel about the House of Fates, but I want to write about another house and what's taking place behind the closed doors in that house and what happens in the end. And I remember my mother-in-law in the Zoom meeting, which took place 3 years back, she said, why don't you write something happy instead of all these depressing stories? But somehow I think my calling is in depressing stories. I'm more interested in writing these kind of stories rather than goody stories, because I don't find much goodiness around. I want to bring out the worst in the society. Good, everybody is seeing, everybody is going through good things. It's not like good things are not happening, good things are happening everywhere. But the bad things that are not coming out, and the bad things of which people are not aware, or the things that are actually happening, but I'm exaggerating, of course, a bit. I think that is my calling and my genre. So that's
You want to talk a little about the husband's addiction to computer and forging accounts?
yeah, okay.
So, and I will not ask her where she gets the inspiration from.
I think we can talk this separately about it. There are some people here who might not like it.
no. Here, let me say the husband in question is absolutely fictional.
So this is definitely not inspired from my husband. My husband is a doctor. He's here. He's working in a medical college in Rajouri in JNK. He's a professor in dental department. But this I've seen people doing in my college. I had a batchmate. She had some kind of a disorder. She used to forge her signatures in the bank, and she looted her own roommate.
Oh,
Yeah, so these kind of things, my batchmates are here. They know who I'm talking about. Yeah, the same one. They know who I'm talking about very well. She नहीं इन्हीं में से नहीं है, but she was in our batch in college. So she, and then after doing all this, the entire batch boycotted her completely. Nobody spoke to her. She was totally became a recluse. But then something surprising came of it. She started studying like crazy as in crazy. And then she did very well. Her grades came up. But obviously that thing was there. Everybody came to know what she's doing. So everyone just stayed away from her. So these kind of things happen. People do these things. And sometimes you get a thrill when you see you've done a forgery. Or even that girl, Kamini, she's a kleptomaniac. She goes and she steals. You get a thrill when you take something that doesn't belong to you. एक अंदर से thrill आता है. Oh, I can do this also. Then you go for higher things. But you don't realize that you're becoming like in the end of the chapter, I write, a criminal is born. She doesn't realize she's becoming a criminal. She has become a criminal. If she is doing shoplifting, that moment she is feeling thrilled. But ultimately, kya bana? She's become a criminal. So,
yes, so
these
yeah,
things
that's
happen.
what I wanted to kind of, but she's actually answered that before, that she wants to talk about, because all the characters are broken. I mean, every character has some major flaw or they're broken characters. So anyways, so like Ayush says, this is what, this is what inspires her and that's what she wants to talk about. So great.
Basically,
So
we have to be very secretive in front of Ayush.
yes.
Okay, so AC, AC, I have to tell you something on this thing, what you just said. My husband is saying, I'm not going to tell you any more stories about my family because the second novel is on his family, matlab my in-laws family. So he's like, I'm going to stop telling you any more stories. So I told him, don't worry, I have enough material. I've been married 32 years and I have enough material.
So can you
For
imagine, he
one
had
novel.
no idea, he was confiding in a wife, and now can you?
He says it's very dangerous to talk to you.
What inspired you to write this book, and who's your inspiration in general as a person?
Okay, inspiration I've already told. I used to go to my maternal grandparents' house a lot. So the characters in this novel, they are basically based on that house and my visits there and whatever I gathered, and of course exaggerated a lot. And my inspiration, again, we have a family of writers. My grandparent, my maternal grandparent, my Nana, he was a freedom fighter of Kashmir and a historian. He's written around 35 books on Kashmir, and he was with Sheikh Mohammed Abdullah, the first Prime Minister of Kashmir. So he's my biggest inspiration. My father has also authored a book, Trauma of Kashmir. He is in Kashmir at present, and he went around the small alleys of Kashmir interviewing people during the crisis, during the migration crisis. So he's also written a very interesting book, Trauma of Kashmir. It has short stories of Kashmir. If you can get a chance, his name is Omkar Razdan. He's written a very interesting book. And my mother is also, she's also a scholar. She has written a book on Hindustani ragas. She's an ethnomusicologist. She's a musician by profession. And she has written a book on a thesis, Hindustani ragas, the role of time and season. So how you have to change your ragas according to the time and the season. So she's written a book on that, and she has her own YouTube channel also. She plays the violin beautifully. So they are my inspiration, my Nani, and my parents. So
You should
Any-
write your next book on a root canal doctor who is actually a murderer.
good idea. AC, good idea.
Okay, so you're also getting themes for the next book. Okay, so Ayush, anything else that about your book you want to talk about? Why don't you read? Why don't you
Okay,
read from
sure,
the book?
I can read.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll read it. Yeah, that's good.
Also, another thing I noticed, and do you do that deliberately or was that your editor? Your chapters are like really short, and the titles are summaries of the chapters.
Yeah.
So, did you intend for it to be that way, or?
Maybe I am book critic.
That's also part of my job, really.
Yeah, so that was my style, Nandini. I wanted crisp chapters with sharp endings and sudden shocking endings. So that is again my genre. So I'm going to do that in if I do write the second, that's also going to be the same thing.
You'd
They're
be
going to
surprised. D.H. Lawrence does that. So his chapter titles are actually, you would know what the chapter is about. So
Okay,
so you
I
are
haven't read him, but no, I haven't read him, but I will read him now. Now that you've equated me to such a great author.
No, I have not equated you, but I was defending the fact that I
Okay.
was critiquing it. I said, so I'm not critiquing it.
So
I'm
which
just-
chapter do you want me to read?
It's up to you.
So chapter 2 is the realization. An aroma of spirit pervaded the hospital. It had impregnated every corner as though bathed in it. Nurses and doctors rushed about, attending to patients and their anxious attendants. Margie was a worried woman. So, what happens in this is that Meera has just had an abortion, she's admitted, and the family members are going to the hospital and seeing Meera's condition. Margie, that is the mother, the matriarch, was a worried woman. Her daughter Meera had been admitted last night, and Margie just didn't know what to do. Although Siddhi and Chaya, her daughters in law, were there to help, Margie felt helpless. Margie was extremely protective of her daughter Meera. Never in her wildest dreams did she imagine that this would happen to her. The doctor summoned Siddhi, her elder daughter in law. Mrs. Bakshi, please come here. There are a few medicines you need to get from the chemist. Please get them immediately. The doctor's tone was stern and firm. Siddhi nodded in affirmation. She was very fond of Meera. Most of their afternoons were spent together, knitting and chatting together over multiple cups of coffee. She, in fact, was closer to Meera than to Chaya, her co sister. Chaya was reserved and didn't talk much. Inclined to be arrogant, she didn't think much of Siddhi, Meera, or any of her in laws. Preferring to keep to herself, she buried herself in her books, not engaging in futile conversations or gossip. But this time it was different. Chaya was also very worried. She had no idea that Meera was pregnant. In fact, at an outing to Lajpat Nagar just the previous day, the three of them were laughing, joking, and having a great time. Chaya felt bad for Meera actually. A woman living in a parental home, even after 10 years of marriage, was not what society approved of. A woman was dispatched off to her husband's home as soon as the sacred vows were taken around the fire and given away by her father. So for Meera, life was very difficult as she was still living with her parents. But Meera never interfered in either Siddhi or Chaya's personal lives or of her brothers. She was busy with her reading and writing and would love spending the afternoon knitting or chatting with Siddhi. Siddhi bought the medicines from the chemist, tears streaming down her face. Why in the world did Meera not tell me that she was pregnant? Had I known, we would not have walked with her for 3 hours yesterday in Lajpat Nagar, thought Siddhi. How foolish I am. Being a mother of 2 children myself, I should have realized what was happening when Meera said she felt nauseous a few days back. The tears just would not stop, and Siddhi bought a bottle of water from the chemist. She gulped it down, wiped her tears, and tried to bury her sorrow. She reached Meera's room, and Margie and Chaya came running to her. Have you bought the medicine? What happened, Siddhi? Have you been crying? Asked Maji anxiously. Siddhi clutched Maji with one hand and Chaya with the other. The three women wept inconsolably.
Lovely. So, when do we see this getting converted into a, let's say, an OTT series?
Yeah, so I'm trying that. Pramod, my friend, would be adept at answering that question. We've been trying very hard, but it's not yet been done. But let's see, hopefully, in the near future.
Yeah, it has
You
to
never,
be.
never, you will never say never. It could happen anytime.
That'll be so good.
Yeah.
Any further questions, observations?
No oppositions.
Yes,
Thank you, thank
absolutely.
you.
But since we have to continue to wait for the tea.
Please,